Picture a tree. When its leaves rustle and dance, something must be moving them. The wind. When the wind blows hard, the leaves shake violently. When it softens, they barely tremble. And when there's no wind at all, the leaves rest in perfect stillness. Now here's the question that changes everything. When your mind won't stop moving, when thoughts spin and chase and multiply in the middle of the night, what's the wind? What force is shaking the leaves of your consciousness? Welcome. Wherever you are right now, whether it's 3 in the morning and sleep won't come, or midday and you need a break from your own thoughts, you're here because thinking won't stop. If it feels right, share where you're listening from in the comments. Tokyo to Toronto, Mumbai to Mexico City, we're all asking the same question. Get comfortable. Lie down if you can. This isn't about staying rigidly focused. If you drift or sleep, that's fine. Your mind knows what it needs. You're not broken. You're human. So, the wind that moves your mind. The Buddhist teachers used one word for this force: desire. Not just wanting pleasant things. Desire here means everything your mind reaches toward and everything it pushes away. The wanting of things to be a certain way, the demanding that things not be the way they are. It includes craving and aversion, hope and fear, expectation and dread, clinging to what you have and grasping for what you don't. It's the basic movement of, this should be different. Think about the last time your mind wouldn't settle. Wasn't there something underneath the spinning thoughts? Some version of, this isn't right, or I need this to change, or what if this happens? That's the wind. A simple example everyone knows. Someone criticizes you, maybe playfully, just teasing, but something in how they said it lands wrong. It stings. And days later, maybe weeks later, you're still thinking about it, replaying the moment, imagining what you should have said back, feeling that burn of humiliation or anger. Here's what's interesting. The person who said it, they forgot about it 10 minutes later. They're not lying awake, thinking about that comment. But you're still carrying it, still turning it over like a sharp stone in your pocket, still letting it cut you again and again. This is what the Buddha was pointing to when he taught about suffering. Not the initial sting, that's just momentary pain, but the endless replaying, the ruminating, the story building around it. That's suffering. That's what we add. And we do this with everything. Take illness. Disease causes pain. This is undeniable. But watch carefully, and you'll notice that most of the suffering in illness is actually the mind's commentary about the illness. This shouldn't be happening. Why me? I don't deserve this. When will it end? Why isn't the medicine working faster? the desire, the demand, that reality be different from what it is. That's what drives us into real suffering. Now let me be clear. This isn't about becoming passive or accepting injustice. The Buddhist path is deeply engaged with reducing suffering, both yours and others. What we're talking about is something more subtle. The difference between responding skillfully to life and constantly battling with the reality of what is. Shantideva, a Buddhist master from the 8th century, said, "Look honestly at what's happening. If something can be changed, don't worry. Work to change it. If something cannot be changed, don't worry. It cannot be changed. Worrying doesn't help either way." The worry, the complaint, the endless mental negotiation with reality, these are extra, unnecessary, exhausting. Here's a small example that might make you smile. You're driving, already running late. A train crosses the road. Traffic stops completely. There are 3 cars ahead of you, completely blocked. Nobody can move. And the car behind you starts honking. As if the honking will make the cars levitate. As if by sheer force of noise, a path will magically appear. We do this with our minds constantly. We honk at reality. We complain at what cannot be changed in this moment. We add layers of mental noise to situations that are already uncomfortable enough. One of the Tibetan teachers used to say, "If you want to know your real state of mind, just sit alone in silence and watch what arises." Do noble thoughts appear? Loving kindness? Or do sad memories surface? Anxieties about the future? Criticisms of people who aren't even in the room? How long does it take before your mind starts hurting you? Not to judge yourself, just to see clearly. Just to notice the wind. But here's the beautiful thing. All of this can change. Not through force or positive thinking or trying to be perfect, but through understanding, through seeing the mechanism clearly, through learning, and this is the heart of it all, to let go. Letting go. That's what we're here to explore together. How to release your grip on thoughts that serve no purpose. How to stop carrying stones that only weigh you down. How to meet this moment without the endless commentary that turns pain into suffering. This is an ancient art, refined over 2,500 years. And I need to be honest with you. This teaching might feel heavy at times. You might have hoped for something purely soothing. Instead, we're going to look at the patterns in your own mind that create suffering. Someone once said to a teacher, "I came here for peace, and you're telling me I need to change my life." The teacher smiled and said, "This is the path to genuine peace. Not temporary comfort, real freedom." So yes, we're going to look at some uncomfortable things. How you hold on to past hurts unnecessarily. how you project anxiously into futures that haven't happened, how you demand that people and situations be different from what they are, how you narrate your life instead of living it. But we'll do this gently, the way a good friend might point out that you've been carrying a heavy bag for miles and you could just set it down. Here's what's coming. We'll explore the commentator in your head, that voice that narrates everything, turning direct experience into words and judgments. You'll recognize how much of your life you're experiencing secondhand. We'll look at the specific burdens most people carry, past traumas that have completed their teaching but won't release, future anxieties that steal this moment, the only one we actually have, the habit of complaint that adds unnecessary suffering to what's already difficult. We'll talk about genuine contentment, not settling, but finding freedom that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. The ancient teachers discovered something radical. Happiness isn't about collecting pleasant experiences. It's about needing less from each moment. And throughout all of this, we'll keep returning to the practice of letting go, releasing what doesn't serve, opening the hand that's been clenched around ideas and identities and demands. You don't have to believe anything I say. Buddhist teachings aren't about faith. They're about investigation. The Buddha himself said, "Don't accept my words just because I said them. Test them in your own experience." So notice what resonates. Take what's useful. Leave what isn't. This is your journey. I'm just sharing what I've learned, in case it helps you too. The tree is still there, leaves rustling in the wind. But now you're starting to understand what the wind is. And once you understand the wind, once you can recognize desire in all its forms, the wanting and the not wanting, the grasping and the pushing away, you start to have a choice. Not the choice to stop the wind completely, but the choice to find stillness even while the wind blows. That kind of peace that doesn't depend on perfect conditions, is what we're moving toward. And wherever you are in the world right now, whatever brought you to this moment of listening, thank you for being here, for being willing to look at your own mind with honesty and kindness. We're in this together. Let's continue. Let's return to that tree for a moment. Picture it more clearly now. The trunk is solid, rooted deep in the earth. The branches spread wide, and the leaves, green or gold or bare, depending on the season, move according to forces they don't control. When there's a strong wind, the whole tree sways. Leaves thrash and scatter. Some break free entirely and tumble away. When the wind is moderate, there's a gentle rustling, pleasant, even musical. And when the air is completely still, each leaf hangs in perfect peace. The tree doesn't blame itself for moving. The leaves don't feel guilty about rustling. There's just cause and effect. Wind causes movement. No wind, no movement. This isn't a judgment. It's just observation. Now bring this same quality of observation to your own mind right now. What's the wind in your mind at this very moment? Perhaps it's anxiety about tomorrow, a meeting, a conversation, a medical appointment, or replaying something from earlier today, wondering if you said the wrong thing. It might be a low hum of dissatisfaction. This isn't quite right. Something needs to change. You should be further along by now. Or your mind feels relatively calm right now, following along, present with these words. Notice that too. Notice what stillness feels like when it appears. The Buddha taught about this force. We're calling desire with extraordinary precision. In the original Pali language, he used the word tanha, which literally means thirst. That deep biological craving for water when you're dehydrated. That's the quality of how the mind reaches for things. But he wasn't just talking about wanting a glass of water, or craving chocolate, or desiring a new car. He was pointing to something much more fundamental and pervasive. Tanha has two faces. The first face is wanting things to be, wanting pleasure, success, love, security, wanting the moment to last, wanting more. The second face is wanting things not to be, wanting pain to stop, the annoying person to go away, the past to be different, this moment to end quickly. Both faces create the same inner turbulence. Watch this in the small moments of your day. You're sitting at a red light, and you check your phone. That's desire, reaching for stimulation, because this moment of waiting feels empty. Someone tells a story at dinner, and you're planning what you'll say next instead of listening. That's desire, wanting to be seen and heard. You replay an argument from 3 days ago, scripting what you should have said. That's desire, wanting the past to be different than it was. None of this is bad. You're not doing anything wrong. This is just what minds do when they haven't been trained otherwise. The Buddha said, "All beings are driven by craving, pulled along by the current of desire, like cattle led by a rope." Strong image, right? But also kind. He's including everyone, including himself, before his awakening. We're all in this together, all being pulled by forces we barely notice. The revolutionary insight isn't that desire exists. It's that we can see it clearly. And when we see it clearly, really see it, not just understand it intellectually, something shifts. Just notice right now, without any judgment at all. What's pulling at your attention? What's your mind reaching toward or pushing away? Physical discomfort wanting to shift position. Emotional states you wish would change. Loneliness, anxiety, boredom, thoughts about what comes after this. Planning, preparing, worrying. See if you can just name it quietly to yourself. Wanting this to end. Wanting to feel better. Wanting to understand this perfectly. Wanting to be done with overthinking once and for all. The naming itself, gentle, curious, without judgment, creates a tiny bit of space between you and the wanting. That space is freedom. Not freedom from desire completely. That comes much later, if at all. But freedom from being completely identified with it. Freedom from being tossed around unconsciously. You start to see, oh, this is the wind. This is what's moving my mind right now. And just that seeing, just that clear recognition, changes your relationship to the movement. The tree doesn't stop the wind, but you're not a tree. You have awareness. You can know what's happening while it's happening. That knowing is everything. Take a breath here. Let whatever you noticed be okay. No need to fix it or change it or make it go away. Just let it be known. This is the beginning of wisdom. There's a particular kind of weight most of us carry without realizing it. Not the weight of current responsibilities, taking care of family, showing up for work, managing the real demands of life. Those are actual burdens, yes, but they're active, present, necessary. I'm talking about something else. The weight of things that are already finished, but that we refuse to set down. Let me tell you how this usually works. Someone criticizes you, a friend, a colleague, someone you barely know. They say something dismissive, or mocking, or just thoughtlessly cruel. It might even be disguised as teasing, with a smile attached. But underneath, there's a little barb. In that moment, it stings. Your face gets hot. Your stomach tightens. You laugh it off externally, while something inside you recoils. That moment passes. The conversation moves on. You go home. Days pass. Maybe weeks. But you're still thinking about it. You replay the moment in your mind like a video clip stuck on repeat. You think about what you should have said back. You imagine the perfect comeback that would have left them speechless. You feel that sting again, fresh as the first time. You build a whole narrative about what it means, about your worth, your relationship, your value. Here's what's extraordinary. The person who said it, they forgot about it 10 minutes later. Completely forgot. They're not lying in bed at night thinking about that comment they made. It left their mind as quickly as it left their mouth. But you're still carrying it. Still turning it over like a sharp stone in your pocket. Still letting it cut you every time you reach in and touch it. Why? Not because you're weak or oversensitive, or doing something wrong, but because we've never been taught how to complete things. We've never learned the art of setting experiences down, when they're finished teaching us. Think of it like carrying a backpack. Every unfinished experience, every unprocessed hurt, every story we keep telling ourselves, these are items we pack into the bag. One stone, then another, then another. Over years, the backpack gets so heavy, we can barely stand upright. But we keep carrying it because we've forgotten it's even there. We think the weight is just part of life. We think this is how heavy everyone feels. But here's something remarkable. A stone is only heavy when you're holding it. Set it on a table and it weighs nothing to you. The stone hasn't changed. Your relationship to it has changed. What if you could set something down right now? Not forget it. Forgetting isn't the same as releasing. Not pretend it didn't happen. That's bypassing, not healing. But actually complete your relationship with it. Let it be something that happened, that you learned from, if there was something to learn, and that doesn't need to be carried any further. There's a teaching in Buddhism about this, about the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens to you, the arrow that strikes you, the loss, the betrayal, the illness, the disappointment. Pain is real and unavoidable in human life. Suffering is what you do with the pain. It's the second arrow you shoot into yourself, the story you tell about the pain, the identity you build around being the person who was hurt, the endless replay and rumination. The first arrow, you didn't choose that. The second arrow, that's optional. Most of what we carry in our backpack is second arrows. Try this, gently, right now. Bring to mind one thing you've been carrying. Not the biggest, most traumatic thing. Start small. A minor grudge. A small embarrassment. Something that happened months or years ago that still occasionally surfaces in your thoughts. Just acknowledge it. Don't try to analyze it or fix it or make it go away. Just say quietly to yourself, I've been carrying this. That's all. Just recognition. Sometimes just seeing that we're carrying something is enough for the hand to naturally open a little. Not because we force it to, but because once you see clearly what you're doing, the doing becomes less automatic. You've been carrying more than you need to. And it's not a moral failing that you picked these things up in the first place. You did the best you could with what you knew. But now you're learning something new. You're learning that you have a choice about what you continue to carry. Breathe here for a moment. Feel the possibility of being lighter. Not empty. You're not trying to become empty. Just lighter. Just carrying only what actually needs to be carried right now, in this moment. That's freedom. Let's look at something harder now. Something where the difference between pain and suffering becomes crystal clear. illness. When the body breaks down through disease or injury, or the simple wearing away of time, there's pain. Real, physical pain. This isn't psychological. This isn't something you can think your way out of. Nerve endings fire. Tissues inflame. The body hurts. Nobody's asking you to deny that. But here's what's remarkable when you start paying close attention. Most of the suffering in illness isn't actually the physical pain itself. It's the mind's commentary about the pain. Listen to the thoughts that arise around physical difficulty. This shouldn't be happening. Why me? I don't deserve this. When will it end? Why isn't the medicine working faster? I should be able to walk by now. Each of these thoughts is suffering piled on top of pain. Each one is the mind demanding that reality be different than it is. And here's the hard truth. That demand, that insistence that things should be other than they are, causes its own kind of agony that's often worse than the physical pain itself. Think of it mathematically, if that helps. Maybe 10% of your suffering is the actual situation, the pain, the limitation, the natural fear that comes with physical vulnerability. But 90% is the story your mind is telling about the situation. This ruins everything. I'm a burden now. Nobody will love me like this. I'm weak for not handling this better. Layer upon layer of additional suffering. I need to be very careful here. I'm not saying you should just accept terrible circumstances without working to change them. Seek treatment. Advocate for yourself. Grieve what you've lost. All of that is appropriate and necessary. What I'm pointing to is more subtle. It's the difference between I'm in pain and I'm doing everything I can to heal versus I'm in pain and this is a catastrophe and my life is ruined and why is this happening to me and I can't stand this and it will never get better. One is meeting reality, the other is fighting reality while also being in pain. One is hard, the other is unbearable. I've known people who faced serious illness with a kind of grace that was almost shocking. Not because they weren't suffering, not because they had superhuman ability to override pain, but because they somehow weren't at war with what was happening to them. They felt the pain. They did what needed to be done. They grieved when grief came. But underneath all of it, there was this quality of acceptance. Not resignation, acceptance. A kind of, yes, this is what's happening now, instead of, no, this can't be happening. And somehow, that acceptance didn't make them weaker. It made them stronger, more present, more able to find moments of peace even in the midst of difficulty. The Buddha taught about this with extraordinary compassion. He didn't say pain is an illusion or suffering doesn't exist. He said, Look clearly at the nature of suffering. Understand where it comes from. And then, with wisdom, learn to stop creating the unnecessary parts. The pain of illness, that's the unavoidable part. The biological reality of a body that's vulnerable and impermanent. The mental anguish of demanding that the illness not be there, that you be different, that life be fair, that this moment be other than it is, that's the part you can work with. Not by suppressing your feelings, not by pretending everything's fine, but by seeing clearly, this is what I'm adding. This is the 90%. And when you see it clearly, you can begin to let it go. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually, moment by moment, the clenched fist of resistance begins to open. This doesn't mean you like what's happening. It means you stop arguing with reality while also experiencing pain. It means you save your energy for healing instead of spending it on an inner war you can never win. If you're dealing with physical pain right now, in this moment, or in your life in general, please be gentle with yourself as you hear this. Your pain is real. Your fear is understandable. These teachings aren't about judging you. They're about showing you where freedom might be possible, even in difficulty. Even a little less suffering is worth finding. There's a voice that never stops talking. Not out loud, though sometimes it leaks out in muttering or whispered fragments. But inside, in the privacy of your own mind, there's a constant stream of commentary running alongside everything you experience. Right now, as you're listening to these words, it might be saying something. Is this going to help me? I should be taking notes. I wonder if I lock the door. My back hurts. This is interesting. This is boring. Am I doing this right? This isn't a diagnosis. This isn't something wrong with you. This is just what minds do. But here's what's worth noticing. Think of watching a football match on television. The game is happening on the field. Players running, the ball moving, goals scored or missed. But there's also a commentator talking over the action, explaining what just happened, predicting what might happen next, offering opinions and analysis. Sometimes the commentary helps you understand the game better, but sometimes, maybe most of the time, it's just noise layered over top of something you could experience directly. Your mind does this constantly. You're not watching the game of your life. You're listening to the commentary about your life. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you walk into a temple or a church or someone's home, and there on a table are the most exquisite flowers you've ever seen. Deep red roses or delicate orchids or wildflowers arranged with such care that they look almost too perfect. And immediately, faster than you can even choose to do it, Your mind says, wow, those are beautiful. And then, those can't be real. And then you're leaning in to check, to see if they're silk or plastic, to solve the puzzle your mind has created. But notice what just happened. The flowers are right there in front of you. Color, shape, the way light falls on petals, the subtle shadows between stems. That's the direct experience. Vivid, immediate, alive. But the moment your mind started talking, the moment it said, beautiful, and can't be real, you stopped seeing the flowers. You started seeing the words instead. You're looking at the menu, not tasting the meal. Or think about a sunset. You're standing somewhere with a clear view of the horizon, and the sky is doing that thing it sometimes does. Layers of gold and pink and purple, clouds lit from underneath, the whole sky on fire. And you say, out loud or silently, how beautiful. As soon as you say it, something shifts. You're no longer seeing the sunset. You're seeing your idea of the sunset. You're seeing the word beautiful and everything that word means to you. But the actual sky, the living, changing, impossible to capture reality of it, slips away behind the label. This is what I mean by living in translation. Reality happens in high definition, vivid, textured, infinitely detailed. But we experience most of it through a kind of internal narrator who's constantly converting everything into words, concepts, judgments, stories. And the translation is always worse than the original. Here's an example that might cut close to home. You're at your child's first birthday party, or their dance recital, or maybe just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when they do something adorable, or funny, or surprisingly grown up. And you reach for your phone to capture it. Nothing wrong with that. We all do it. Memories matter. Photos are precious. But watch what happens. You're holding your phone up, looking at your child through the screen, making sure they're centered in the frame, checking the lighting, waiting for the perfect moment. And the moment happens. Their first steps, or their laugh, or that look they give you that makes your heart crack open. But you're watching it on a 3-inch screen instead of with your actual eyes. Later, you'll have the video. You can watch it again, share it with relatives, keep it forever. But the real moment, the one that was happening in high definition right in front of you, you experienced it through a cracked screen, pixelated, mediated, second-hand. This is what the discursive mind does to everything. It turns direct experience into commentary, vivid reality into words about reality, the thing itself into thoughts about the thing. And we do this so habitually, so automatically, that we don't even realize we're doing it. The taste of your coffee this morning, Did you actually taste it? Or were you thinking about your day while you drank? The feeling of water on your skin in the shower, did you feel it? Or were you planning conversations you need to have? The face of someone you love, when's the last time you really looked at them without simultaneously thinking about what you need to tell them, or what they might be thinking, or whether they seem happy or tired? Most of the time, we're not here. We're in our heads, listening to the narrator describe what's happening instead of actually experiencing what's happening. And here's the gentle revelation I want to offer you. You've been living in translation your whole life. Not because you're doing something wrong, not because you're broken or damaged or insufficient, but because no one ever taught you there was another way. No one ever showed you that you could experience the flowers directly, without the commentary. That you could taste the coffee without narrating how good it is. That you could be with someone you love in complete presence, not separated by the constant internal monologue about the interaction. The Buddha called this discursive mind papanyinka, a Pali word that means something like proliferation or elaboration, or the spreading and multiplying of thoughts. One thing happens, and the mind immediately creates 10 thoughts about it. Each thought spawns 5 more. Within seconds, you're completely lost in a forest of mental proliferation, far from the simple reality of what actually occurred. You see the flowers, and your mind builds an entire narrative. You feel the sunset, and your mind creates a story about beauty and impermanence and how you should feel. Your child laughs, and your mind is already thinking about how fast they're growing up and whether you're capturing enough memories and what kind of parent you are. The original experience, simple, direct, complete in itself, gets buried under layers of thought. Take a moment here and just notice. Right now, listening to these words, where is your attention? Are you hearing the words directly, or are you already thinking about them, judging them, agreeing or disagreeing, planning how you might use this information? Can you find the difference between the direct experience of listening and the commentary about listening? That difference, that tiny gap between reality and the mind's narration of reality, is where freedom lives. Not freedom as in escaping your life. Freedom as in actually being present for your life. This is the first gift of meditation. Not bliss, not transcendence, not becoming a better person. Just this, the ability to cut through the commentary and meet reality directly, even for a moment. And once you taste it, once you experience what it's like to see flowers without words, to feel water without thinking, to be with someone without the narrator running, you realize what you've been missing. Not missing in the sense that your life was worthless before, but missing in the sense that there's a depth and richness available in every ordinary moment that the commentary covers up. You've been watching life through a screen when you could be living it directly. Let me give you another example, one that might feel painfully familiar. You're meeting a friend for coffee. Someone you care about, someone you haven't seen in a while, someone whose company you genuinely enjoy. You're looking forward to this. You sit down across from each other. They start telling you about something that's been happening in their life. Maybe something difficult they're going through, or exciting news they want to share. They're talking, looking at you, trusting you with something real. And you're sitting there nodding, making appropriate facial expressions, saying, "Aha," at the right moments. But inside, your narrator is running wild. She looks tired. Wonder if she's upset with me. Did I say something wrong last time we talked? I should have ordered a different coffee, this one's too bitter. Did I lock my car? I think I locked it, but I'm not completely sure. Should I go check? No, that would be weird. What was she just saying? Something about her job. I should probably respond soon. What's an appropriate response? She's still talking. I wonder if she can tell I'm not fully listening. Okay, focus. What is she actually saying? Meanwhile, your friend is right there, 12 inches away from you, actually present, actually speaking, actually offering themselves in this moment of connection. But you're completely absent. Not because you're a bad friend, not because you don't care, but because the narrator is so loud, so insistent, so automatic, that it drowns out the actual experience of being with another human being. This happens to everyone. It happens to me. It happens to people who've been meditating for decades. It happens to the wisest, most mindful people you know. This is just how minds work when they haven't been trained to do otherwise. But here's what's sad about it. That moment with your friend, that opportunity for real connection, for actually meeting another person in presence and attention, it's gone. You can't get it back. Later, you might not even remember what they said, because you weren't really there to hear it. And this happens not just in coffee shops, but everywhere. Your partner is trying to tell you something important, and you're thinking about work. Your child is showing you a drawing they made, and you're mentally writing your grocery list. Someone is crying in front of you, and you're rehearsing what you're going to say next, instead of actually listening to what they're saying now. The loneliness of this is profound. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being surrounded by people, but trapped inside your own narration, unable to actually meet anyone because you're too busy listening to your internal commentary about meeting them. And it's exhausting. That narrator never stops, never takes a break, never says, "Okay, I'll be quiet for a while, so you can just be here." It runs from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep, and probably continues in your dreams. Narrating, judging, planning, remembering, predicting, analyzing, comparing, criticizing, on and on and on. No wonder you're tired. No wonder your mind feels like it never stops. It doesn't stop because you've never learned how to turn off the narrator, or at least turn down the volume. But here's the compassionate truth. This isn't your fault. You didn't choose to live this way. You were never given a choice. From the time you learned language, your mind started using it to mediate every experience, and no one ever told you there was an alternative. So please don't use this as another reason to judge yourself. Don't let the narrator grab onto this teaching and turn it into, "See, you can't even have coffee with a friend without your mind wandering. You're terrible at being present. You're failing at mindfulness too." That's just more narration, more commentary, more of the same pattern we're trying to see clearly. Instead, just notice, with gentleness, with curiosity. Oh, look at that. I'm doing it again. The narrator is running. I'm here but not here. Present but absent. That noticing, just that simple recognition, is the beginning of freedom. Let me tell you what you're missing when you live through the narrator instead of through direct experience. The taste of food, when you're actually tasting it. Not thinking about whether it's good or bad, not comparing it to other meals you've had, not planning what you'll eat next, not judging whether you should be eating this at all. Just the pure sensation of flavor on your tongue, sweet, salty, bitter, sour, umami, the texture, the temperature, the way it changes as you chew. Most people go days, weeks, entire lifetimes, barely tasting their food because they're thinking about it instead of tasting it. Your child's laugh when you're actually hearing it. Not recording it on your phone, not thinking, "I should remember this," not worrying about whether they laugh enough or if that cough means they're getting sick. Just the sound itself, pure, unfiltered, hitting your ears and going straight to some ancient part of your brain that knows joy without needing to name it. The breeze on your skin when you're actually feeling it. Not thinking it's windy today, or I should have brought a jacket, or this reminds me of that beach in Portugal. Just air moving across your face, your arms, the back of your neck. Cool or warm, gentle or strong. Just that, nothing else. Sex, when you're actually present in your body. Not performing, not wondering if you're doing it right, not thinking about how you look, or whether your partner is enjoying it, or what you need to do tomorrow. Just sensation, skin on skin, breath, movement, pleasure, or tenderness, or whatever's actually arising in this moment. How often do people make love while their narrator is running the entire time, turning intimacy into a performance review. This moment, right now, exactly as it is, when you're actually here for it. Not judging it as good or bad, not wishing it were different, not planning the next moment or remembering the last one. Just this. Whatever sounds you're hearing, whatever you're feeling in your body, whatever quality of attention is present right now. This is what the Buddha was pointing to when he taught about mindfulness. Not some mystical state you have to achieve through years of meditation. Just direct contact with reality. Being where you are instead of being lost in thoughts about where you are. And the remarkable thing is, once you taste this, even once, even for 30 seconds, everything changes. Because you realize that ordinary moments are not actually ordinary. The feeling of water in the shower, when you're actually present for it, is extraordinary. The sight of leaves moving in wind, when you're really seeing them instead of labeling them, is breathtaking. The simple sensation of breathing, when you drop below the commentary and feel the actual movement of air in your body, is profound. You don't need peak experiences. You don't need to go to Bali, or drop substances, or have a spiritual emergency. You just need to show up for what's already here. This is the first prize of meditation, the first real benefit of training your mind. Not enlightenment, not becoming a better person, not even feeling calmer or happier, though those things often come as byproducts. Just this, direct contact with life. Being awake for the moments that make up your one precious existence, instead of sleeping through them while the narrator runs its endless show. The Buddha said, "The way to live is to be diligent, mindful, and self-controlled. Live in such a way that you experience each moment fully." Not perfect presence every second. That's not realistic for anyone, except maybe the most advanced practitioners. But tasting it, knowing what it's like, being able to drop below the commentary when it matters, when life is offering you something real and you want to actually receive it. This isn't about being perfect at presence. It's about discovering that presence is possible at all. That you don't have to live your entire life through the narrator. That there's another way to meet reality, direct, immediate, alive. Once you know this is possible, you can't fully go back to autopilot. Oh, you'll still spend most of your time in the narrator. We all do. But you'll catch yourself more often. You'll notice when you're thinking about the flowers instead of seeing them. And in that noticing, you'll have a choice. You can stay in the commentary, or you can drop into direct experience. Try this if you want. Not now, later today, when you're doing something ordinary. Pick one simple thing. Brushing your teeth, opening a door, drinking water, putting on your shoes. Something you do every day without thinking about it. And just for that moment, Just for the 30 seconds or 1 minute it takes to do that thing, see if you can do it without the narrator. Don't narrate the action. Don't judge whether you're doing it right. Don't think about what comes next. Just feel the actual sensations of the action itself. The bristles on your teeth, the weight of the door handle, the coolness of water down your throat, the pressure of laces being tied. That's it. That's the whole practice. And if you do this, if you taste even one moment of direct experience today, you'll understand what I mean about what you've been missing. Not missing in a way that should make you feel bad about all the moments you've narrated through, but missing in a way that makes you hungry for more of this aliveness, this immediacy, this simple being here. Feel yourself here right now, listening, not thinking about listening, just the actual experience of it. Sound arriving in your ears, meaning arising, your body sitting or lying however it is. This is enough. This moment, exactly as it is complete. There's an image that one of the great Tibetan teachers used to describe what most of us are doing to ourselves. Picture a small bird, maybe a sparrow or a finch, something delicate and built for flight. Its wings are perfect. Its body is light. Everything about its design says, this creature was made to soar. But someone has tied small stones to its feet. Just a few at first. Then a few more. Then more still. And now when the bird tries to fly, it can't. It beats its wings desperately. Feathers scatter everywhere from the effort. It manages to lift off the ground for a second, maybe 2, before crashing back down. Again and again it tries, exhausting itself, hurting itself, unable to understand why something that should be natural, flight, has become impossible. This is what we do to ourselves with mental burdens. Not the real responsibilities of life. Those are different. Taking care of people who depend on you, showing up for work, managing the actual demands of being human in the world. Those aren't stones tied to your feet. Those are just life. I'm talking about something else entirely. I'm talking about finished things we refuse to set down. Experiences that happened years ago, sometimes decades ago, that have nothing left to teach us, but that we carry anyway. Hurts we've examined from every possible angle. Regrets we've replayed so many times, we could stage them as a play. Resentments we've fed and watered and kept alive long after the person who hurt us has forgotten the whole thing. These become like tattoos on our minds. Not the decorative kind you choose because they mean something beautiful to you, but the kind that get burned in without your conscious choice, experiences that brand themselves into your psyche and stay there, permanent, unchangeable, always visible, even when you close your eyes. I am the person who was betrayed. I am the person who failed. I am the person who lost everything. I am the person who wasn't chosen. When memory becomes identity, memory becomes prison. And here's what's important to understand about weight. A stone is only heavy when you're holding it. Right now, if you picked up a rock, just an ordinary rock from outside, and held it in your hand, you'd feel its weight. After a few minutes, your arm would start to ache. After an hour, the pain would be significant. After several hours, you might cause actual injury to your muscles and tendons. But if you set that same rock on a table, it weighs nothing to you. The rock hasn't changed. Its mass is exactly the same, but your relationship to it has changed, and that changes everything. The memories you're carrying, the old wounds, the ancient grievances, the catalogue of ways you've been hurt or have hurt others, they're only crushing you because you're holding them. And the tragedy isn't the event itself. The tragedy is the endless reliving. Something happened to you, maybe something terrible, maybe something that genuinely marked you, changed you, shaped who you became. That was the first arrow, as the Buddha would say. That was pain, and it was real, and it mattered. But then you picked up the arrow, and you've been stabbing yourself with it ever since. Not on purpose. Not because you're masochistic or broken or doing something wrong, but because no one ever taught you how to complete things, how to let an experience be finished when it's finished teaching you. Some things need time to process. I want to be very clear about this. Grief has its own timeline. Trauma needs proper attention and often professional support to heal. There are wounds that don't close quickly, and trying to rush past them or pretend they don't exist is its own kind of violence. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the difference between processing something and being possessed by it. Between honoring what happened and building your entire identity around what happened. Between carrying a memory with wisdom and being crushed under the weight of that memory because you won't set it down even after it's taught you everything it has to teach. There are experiences in your past right now. I'd bet anything on this, that you've examined from every possible angle. You've thought about what you could have done differently. You've imagined alternative outcomes. You've analyzed why it happened and what it means about you and whether you deserved it. And there's nothing left to learn from it. The examination is complete. You've gotten everything that experience has to give you. But you're still carrying it, still turning it over in your mind, still letting it define who you are and what's possible for you. Why? Sometimes because it's familiar. Sometimes because releasing it feels like betraying yourself or the person you were when it happened. Sometimes because you've told the story so many times to yourself and others that you don't know who you'd be without it. But mostly because you've never been shown that you have a choice. You can set it down, not forget it. That's not what I'm suggesting. Not pretend it didn't happen or didn't matter. Not bypass the real processing that still needs to happen if it needs to happen. But if it's finished, if there's nothing left to learn, nothing left to process, just the habit of picking it up and carrying it and letting it weigh you down, you can set it down. The bird can fly when the stones are removed. You can move through life with a lightness you've forgotten was possible when you release what you don't need to carry anymore. Not all at once, not perfectly, but stone by stone, burden by burden, you can learn to let go. And every single thing you release makes the next breath easier. The past can become a kind of prison. But here's what's strange and sad and deeply human about it. Sometimes we get so used to our cell that we don't want to leave it. Think about what a prison cell provides. If you've been in it long enough, it's familiar, predictable. You know exactly what to expect. The walls are in the same place every day. The routine never changes. There are no surprises, no unknowns, no demands to be anyone other than who you've always been. Freedom, on the other hand, is terrifying. Freedom means you have to decide who you are, instead of being defined by what happened to you. Freedom means facing an open future instead of hiding in a closed past. Freedom means letting go of the story you've been telling about yourself, the story that explains everything, that makes sense of your suffering, that gives you an identity, even if it's a painful one. We become attached to our wounds. Not because we enjoy suffering, please hear this clearly, but because our wounds become part of how we understand ourselves. I am the person who was abandoned. I am the person who was betrayed. I am the person who lost everything. I am the person who never gets chosen. These identities are painful, yes, but they're also stable. They're known. They explain our current struggles and excuse our current limitations. Of course, I can't trust people. Look what happened to me. Of course, I'm afraid of trying. You don't understand what I've been through. Of course, I'm stuck. You would be too if this had happened to you. And all of that might be true. Trauma is real. Pain shapes us. What happened to you matters, and I'm not minimizing it. But there's a difference between acknowledging how the past has shaped you and letting the past be the only thing that defines you. There's a difference between saying, "This happened to me, and it was terrible, and it changed me," and saying, "This happened to me, and therefore I can never be anything other than what this made me." The second version is prison. and it's such a familiar prison that leaving it feels like losing yourself. There's actually a documented phenomenon with people who've been incarcerated for many years. When they're finally released, some of them deliberately commit crimes so they can go back. Not because prison is pleasant, it's not. But because freedom is overwhelming and unfamiliar, and demands things of them they no longer know how to give. The cell is terrible, but it's home. We do this psychologically all the time. We get so identified with being the victim, the wounded one, the person who suffered, that we resist anything that might threaten that identity, even healing itself. Let me be the victim a little longer. Not consciously. I don't think anyone says this out loud to themselves. But unconsciously, there's a clinging to the familiar story, even when that story is strangling us. Because if we're not the person this happened to, who are we? If we release the defining trauma, what defines us? If we stop identifying with our wounds, what's left? And here's where I need to be extremely careful, because this teaching can be misused. I am not saying that trauma doesn't matter. I am not saying you should just get over it. I am not saying that people who struggle with the aftermath of terrible things are choosing to be victims. Trauma is real. Pain is real. The impact of what happened to you is real and valid and deserves compassion, both from others and from yourself. What I'm pointing to is more subtle. It's the question, when does honoring what happened become being imprisoned by what happened? When does processing the past become avoiding the present? When does acknowledging your wounds become building your entire life around protecting those wounds from ever healing? These are hard questions. They require real honesty with yourself. And only you can answer them about your own life. But consider this possibility. What if there's a version of you on the other side of your story about yourself? What if you could honor what happened, carry the wisdom it gave you, acknowledge how it shaped you, and still not be defined by it? What if you could be more than what was done to you? This isn't about forced positivity or spiritual bypassing or pretending the past doesn't matter. This is about the difference between carrying a memory and being carried away by a memory. You get to choose. Not whether the past happened. You don't get to choose that. Not whether it hurt. It did, and that's valid. Not whether it changed you. Of course it did. But you do get to choose whether it continues to define the boundaries of what's possible for you. Predictable suffering versus unknown freedom. The familiar cell versus the open door. Which do you choose? This isn't a demand. This isn't me telling you that you should choose differently or that you're failing if you find yourself still in the cell. Healing happens in its own time, and you're allowed to be wherever you are in that process. This is just an invitation to notice. Notice if you're clinging to a story about yourself that you could set down. Notice if you're staying in the familiar prison because freedom feels too uncertain. Notice if your identity has become so wrapped up in what happened to you that you can't imagine who you'd be without it. Just notice, with gentleness, with compassion for how hard this is. The door is unlocked. It has been for a while now. You can stay as long as you need to. And when you're ready, if you're ready, you can walk out. We've been talking about the past, about how we imprison ourselves in what already happened. But there's another way we escape the present, and it's just as common. We project ourselves into the future. When this moment isn't enough, when right now feels empty, or uncomfortable, or insufficient, we leave. Not physically, but mentally. We abandon the present and take refuge in fantasies about what's coming. When I get that promotion, then I'll be happy. When I lose this weight, then I'll be confident. When I meet the right person, then I'll feel complete. When I retire, then I'll finally relax. When the kids are older, then I'll have time for myself. Always when. Always then. Never now. And I understand why we do this. The present moment is often difficult. It contains discomfort, uncertainty, things we don't know how to handle. The future, at least in our imagination, can be perfect. We can script it however we want. We can eliminate all the problems and keep all the good parts, and finally, arrive at the place where life actually begins. But here's what the Buddhist teachers say about this, and it's shocking when you first hear it. Release hope. Wait. What? Hope is supposed to be good, right? Hope is what keeps us going. Hope is what gets us through hard times. Why would anyone tell you to release hope? Because hope and fear are two sides of the same coin. When you hope for something in the future, you're simultaneously afraid you won't get it. When you hope your life will be better someday, you're simultaneously afraid it might not be. When you hope for rescue, for transformation, for the day when everything finally clicks into place, you're also carrying the fear that it won't happen, that you'll be disappointed again, that you'll always be stuck right where you are. Hope sounds positive, but it comes packaged with anxiety. And both hope and fear keep you out of the present moment. They keep you oriented toward a future that doesn't exist yet, instead of engaging with the life that's actually happening right now. Now, I need to be very careful here, because this teaching is easily misunderstood. I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan or work toward things or try to improve your circumstances. Planning is wise. Having direction is important. Working to reduce suffering, yours and others, is central to the Buddhist path. What I'm talking about is the difference between skillful planning and obsessive future dwelling. Between having goals and abandoning the present in service of an imaginary future. Between working to improve your life and refusing to actually live your life until everything is perfect. There's a story that captures this beautifully. Imagine a gardener who's so focused on the harvest that he misses the entire growing season. He plants the seeds, yes, and he tends them when he remembers to. But he's not really there. He's not seeing the first green shoots push through the soil. He's not noticing how the plants change day by day, how they respond to sun and rain, how they grow toward the light. He's mentally already at harvest time, already imagining the perfect vegetables, the abundant crop, the satisfaction of finally having something to show for all this work. And then harvest comes, and it's fine, good, even. But it's also over, quickly. And he realizes he missed spring entirely. Missed summer. Missed the actual experience of gardening because he was so focused on the outcome. So what does he do? He plants again, immediately. And again, he abandons the present season to fantasize about the next harvest. And this becomes his whole life, always living for the next thing, always waiting for the moment when life will finally begin, always missing the only moment that's actually available to him, which is this one. We do this constantly. I'll be happy when. Life will be good when. I'll finally relax when. And the cruel thing is that when you finally arrive at that future moment you've been waiting for, you don't know how to be present for it. You've spent so much time not being present, always oriented toward the next thing, that presence isn't a skill you've developed. So you arrive at the moment you've been hoping for, and within days, sometimes hours, you're already hoping for something else. The promotion comes, and now you're hoping for the next promotion. You lose the weight, and now you're worried about keeping it off. You meet someone wonderful, and now you're anxious about whether it will last. You retire, and within a week, you're restless, looking for the next thing to hope for. Because you never learned how to be here. You never learned how to let this moment, exactly as it is, imperfect and incomplete and not quite what you hoped for, be enough. So here's the question the Buddhist teachers ask. What if this moment is already complete? Not perfect, complete. Not everything you want, but enough. What if you don't need to wait for anything to change before you can actually be present for your life? What if the life you're waiting to begin is already happening right now, and you're missing it because you're focused on some imaginary future where everything is finally the way you think it should be. This isn't about giving up. This isn't about becoming passive or accepting terrible circumstances without working to change them. This is about the radical act of being here, fully here, in this imperfect, incomplete, not quite right yet moment. Because this is the only moment you actually have. This is the only moment you've ever had. Every other moment, past and future, is a story your mind is telling. The past is a memory. The future is a fantasy. This, right now, whatever you're experiencing as you listen to these words, this is the only thing that's real. And it might not be what you hoped for. It might be difficult or uncomfortable, or boring, or painful. But it's real. It's alive. It's the actual texture of your existence. And when you stop abandoning it in favor of an imaginary future, when you stop waiting for your life to begin and recognize that it's already begun, something shifts. Not into perfect contentment, not into some blissed out state where nothing bothers you, but into a kind of groundedness that doesn't depend on circumstances being exactly right. You can still have goals. You can still work toward things. You can still hope circumstances improve. But you're not hostage to those hopes anymore. You're not refusing to actually live until the future arrives. You're here. Actually here. Present for the life that's unfolding in this moment. Whatever that life contains. Feel yourself here right now. Not in the past, not in the future. Here. Breathing. Listening. Being exactly where you are. This is enough. This moment, imperfect as it is, picture yourself on a night flight, one of those long international routes where they dim the cabin lights after dinner and everyone settles in to try to sleep. Most people have their headphones on or their blankets pulled up to their chins. The hum of the engines creates a kind of white noise that should be soothing. And then a baby starts crying. Not fussing, crying. That high-pitched wail that cuts through everything, through the engine noise and the headphones and the desperate attempts everyone's making to rest. The mother is clearly doing everything she can. You can hear her moving around, trying different positions, probably nursing or offering a bottle, shushing, rocking. But the baby won't settle. And then, as if on cue, another baby, a few rows back, starts up. Now there are two of them, almost like they're competing. One cries, the other answers. Back and forth, back and forth. This symphony of infant misery echoing through the darkened cabin. You can feel the tension in the air. People shifting in their seats, sighing loudly, That particular quality of collective irritation that builds in enclosed spaces when something is bothering everyone and no one can escape. Someone nearby mutters, not quite whispering, "There should be a rule on airplanes." A children's section, like they used to have smoking sections. Put all the babies and kids in one area so the rest of us can have some peace. You can hear the frustration in the voice. And honestly, part of you understands it. Everyone's tired. Everyone paid for these tickets. Everyone just wants to rest. Another passenger turns around and says with deadpan humor, "Sure, great idea. Which wing should we put them on?" And suddenly, the absurdity becomes clear. The babies are on the airplane. They have to be somewhere. They have as much right to be here as anyone else. Probably more right. They didn't choose to fly. Their parents chose for them. So you have exactly two options. 1. Throw the babies off the plane. Obviously not happening. 2. Release your complaint about the babies being on the plane. That's it. Those are your only real choices. And here's what's fascinating when you start to pay attention to this. There are two distinct sources of suffering happening in that moment. First, there's the actual sound of the crying. It's penetrating. It's designed by evolution to be impossible to ignore. It triggers something primal in human brains that says, "Baby in distress, must help." That's real discomfort. This cannot be denied. But then there's the second source, and this one is much bigger. It's the mental commentary about the crying. This shouldn't be happening. Why didn't the parents drug the baby so it would sleep? Modern parents don't know how to control their children. This is ruining everything. How long is this going to last? Someone should do something. Story after story after story, each one adding another layer of suffering on top of the actual discomfort of the sound. That ratio we talked about before, 10% situation, 90% narration. It's happening right here. Maybe 10% of the suffering is the actual penetrating quality of a baby's cry, the biological discomfort of that particular frequency hitting your eardrums. But 90% is the story being told about it. The complaint, the resistance, the demand that reality be different than it is. And the person who's suffering the most, the one who's going to have the worst flight, the one who's going to arrive exhausted and irritated and miserable, isn't necessarily the person sitting closest to the crying babies. It's the person who's most actively resisting what's happening. The person who can't let go of the complaint. Now, this teaching can be badly misunderstood. This isn't about becoming a doormat. This isn't about accepting mistreatment or injustice, or things that genuinely need to be changed. This isn't about never speaking up or setting boundaries, or working to improve difficult situations. What's being pointed to here is more subtle. It's about seeing clearly what's being added to situations that are already challenging enough without mental commentary making them worse. The babies are crying. That's the situation. Can it be changed right now, in this moment? No. So the suffering created by complaining about it, by building stories about how it shouldn't be happening, by getting more and more worked up about something that cannot be controlled, that's optional. That's the part that can be worked with. This pattern shows up everywhere. Traffic is slow, complaint arises. The weather is bad, complaint arises. Someone says something thoughtless. It gets replayed for hours, building a case against them. The internet is slow, sighing, and cursing as if it's a personal affront instead of just a minor inconvenience. And every single time this happens, the suffering becomes greater than the situation itself warrants. The honesty in recognizing this, in seeing, yes, this is what minds do, this is the human pattern, that's what creates real understanding. This isn't about someone perfect telling you how to be better. This is about recognizing a universal struggle and learning to work with it. So on that flight, irritation arises. The complaint forms. And then there's a choice, not whether to feel irritated, that's already happening, but whether to feed the irritation with stories, or just let it be there without adding to it. The crying doesn't stop, but the suffering about the crying can stop, or at least decrease significantly, if the demand that it be different can be released. This is the practice. This is what freedom looks like in the middle of uncomfortable circumstances. Not the freedom to escape the situation. Sometimes that's not possible. But the freedom to stop making it worse with the mind's constant complaint about what is. People are like mountains. They don't change easily. Mountains are massive, ancient, rooted deep in the earth. They change. Yes, erosion happens. Earthquakes shift things. But these changes take geological time. You can't look at a mountain and expect it to be different tomorrow, just because you'd prefer it to be shaped differently. People are the same way. That friend who's always late, that's their mountainness. The partner who leaves dishes in the sink, that's how they're shaped. The parent who gives unsolicited advice, that's the landscape of who they are. And from the outside, from your perspective, the changes you want from them seem so small, so reasonable, so obviously for the best. If she would just leave 15 minutes earlier, she'd never be late. If he would just put the dishes directly in the dishwasher instead of the sink, it would save so much hassle. If they would just respect that I'm an adult and stop telling me what to do, our relationship would be so much better. All of these things seem completely reasonable from where you're standing. But here's what gets forgotten. Someone is thinking exactly the same thing about you. The friend wants you to be more spontaneous instead of always needing plans. The partner wants you to relax about the dishes because they're not that important. The parent wants you to listen to their advice because they have experience you don't have. And to them, these changes seem just as small, just as reasonable, just as obviously for the best. If it's hard for you to change, and it is, why should it be easy for others? If resistance arises when someone points out your patterns and asks you to be different, why should there be surprise when others resist you pointing out their patterns? Mountains don't move easily, and people are mountains. This isn't judgment, it's just observation. Fire burns. Water is wet. Mountains stay put. And that annoying friend is being themselves, acting according to their nature, shaped by forces that can't be seen and can't be controlled. The liberation comes not from finally getting them to change, though change is possible, slowly, over time, if they choose it. The liberation comes from accepting that this is who they are right now. Not liking it necessarily, acceptance doesn't mean approval. But seeing it clearly without the constant demand that it be different. Shantideva, that 8th century Buddhist master, said something beautiful about this. He said, "Look at what's happening and be honest about what can be changed and what cannot. If something can be changed, then don't worry. Work skillfully to change it. If something cannot be changed, then don't worry. It cannot be changed. Either way, worry is extra. Either way, the complaint doesn't help." Here's a small example that reveals so much about how this works. Imagine driving somewhere, and up ahead, traffic stops completely. There's a train crossing the road, or an accident, or construction. Doesn't matter what it is. The point is, there are 3 cars ahead of you, totally blocked. Nobody can move. And the car behind you starts honking. As if the honking will make the cars levitate. As if by sheer force of noise, the obstacle will dissolve and a path will open up. It's absurd, right? But this is what minds do constantly. Honking at reality. Complaining at what cannot be changed in this moment. Adding noise to situations that are already frustrating enough without the commentary. One of the Tibetan teachers used to say, "If you want to know your real mental state, sit alone in silence and watch what arises." Do kind thoughts appear? Gratitude? Compassion? Or does the mind immediately go to worries, resentments, criticisms of people who aren't even in the room? How long does it take before the mind starts creating suffering where none existed a moment before? Another test. Watch yourself driving in heavy traffic, especially with aggressive drivers around you. How do you react? If you want to know whether meditation practice is actually working, whether any real equanimity is developing, that's your laboratory right there. When someone cuts you off, when someone is going too slow in the fast lane, when someone honks at you for no reason, can the irritation be noticed without feeding it? Can it be seen as just a temporary mental state rather than absolute truth about how terrible other drivers are? Most people fail this test regularly. But the failing isn't the problem. The problem is not seeing that it's happening, not recognizing the pattern of constant complaint that makes everything harder than it needs to be. There's a story about travelers who set out on a long journey through many countries. Before they left, they bought enormous packs, the kind you'd take to climb great mountains or trek through harsh wilderness. They figured they were going to be gone for a long time, so they needed to bring everything they might possibly need. They packed those bags until they were absolutely stuffed. Clothes for every weather possibility, extra shoes, books, full supplies of everything. Each pack must have weighed 30 or 35 pounds. They arrived in a beautiful city and decided to walk around before starting their real journey. See the sights, get a feel for the place. And the weight just kept getting heavier and heavier with every step. They lasted an hour. 1 hour of walking, and they were done. Exhausted, shoulders aching, backs hurting, completely depleted. They stood there, leaning against a wall, mentally going through everything in those packs, making lists of all the things they absolutely did not need to be carrying, all the just-in-case items that were weighing them down for no good reason. Eventually, they left half their stuff behind, and the journey became so much easier, so much lighter, so much more enjoyable. The parallel to mental weight is exact. We could move so much faster on the spiritual path. We could actually make real progress, experience real freedom, if we weren't carrying such enormous backpacks of mental and emotional weight. Grudges that don't need to be held. Resentments that serve no purpose. Demands about how things should be that could be released. Complaints that make us heavier without making anything better. What mental weight is being carried that could be set down? This isn't about minimalism or becoming some kind of ascetic. This is just an honest question. What would it feel like to walk lighter? To let go of the stuff being dragged around for no reason except that it's been dragged around for so long there's been forgetting that it could be put down. This is an invitation, not an instruction. Not a demand to release everything right now or face judgment. Just a question to notice. What's being carried? And is it actually necessary? Or is it just weighing you down? There's an old Zen teaching story about a student who came to a master constantly complaining about the food. "What will we eat today, master?" The student would ask hopefully, maybe making requests for favorite dishes. And the master would always say the same thing: "You have two options for dinner. What there is and what comes. Which one would you prefer?" The teaching is simple, but profound. Life gives you what it gives you. You can be satisfied with that, or you can be dissatisfied with that. But either way, that's what's on offer. People who know how to be satisfied, who can genuinely be content with what is, they live in freedom. People who are constantly demanding that reality be different from what it is, they live in prison. There's another teaching story about a meditation center that looked, from the outside, quite austere. The practitioners there worked long hours, 10 hours a day, sometimes more. Long periods of meditation practice. Strict schedule and routine. No television. No entertainment. Small rooms with minimal possessions. A visitor said, "This looks like prison to me. How can you stand it?" And one of the practitioners laughed and said, "I've seen actual prisons that are more comfortable than some people's lives, in luxury. Clean facilities, hot meals, television, exercise yards, and yet the prisoners feel trapped. And I've seen people living in the top 1% of wealth and comfort who feel just as imprisoned. Some contemplating ending their lives because, even with everything, it's not enough. The prison is not the place. The prison is the attitude. It's the constant belief that the grass will be greener in the next valley. So you go to the next valley, and it's not greener, so you convince yourself it will be greener in the valley after that. And you become a nomad of dissatisfaction, always moving, never arriving, never able to be here, because here is never good enough. There's an attitude some people carry that's never satisfied, never at peace, never content with what is. And that attitude creates more suffering than almost any external circumstance could create. So here's the revolutionary question. What if you stopped running? What if you stopped demanding that this moment, this situation, this life be different than it is? Not forever. You can still work to improve things, still have goals, still move toward better circumstances. But right now, in this moment, what if things could just be what they are? The contentment that comes from this isn't settling or giving up. It's the deepest freedom there is. Freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect before peace can be experienced. There's a musician from Argentina, Facundo Cabral, who wrote a line in one of his songs that cuts straight to the heart of something most people misunderstand about happiness. He sang, "Rich isn't who has most, but who needs least. Let that sit for a moment. Rich isn't who has most, but who needs least. There are people right now with millions in the bank who can't access that money. The account is frozen, or they're too ill to use it, or they're so imprisoned by anxiety about losing it that they can't enjoy anything at all. And there are people with very little who wake up each day with a sense of sufficiency, of having enough, of being okay, exactly as things are. Which one is actually rich? Now apply this same formula to happiness. Happy isn't who enjoys most, but who needs least. Happy isn't the person who collects the most pleasurable experiences, the most exciting adventures, the most perfect circumstances. Happy is the person who needs the least from each moment before they can be at peace. This sounds backward to how most of us have been taught to think about happiness. We're told that happiness comes from getting what we want, the right job, the right relationship, the right body, the right house, the right life. Accumulate enough good things, and happiness will be the natural result. But the mystics, the contemplatives from every spiritual tradition who've gone deep into the nature of human experience, they all say the same thing. Genuine happiness is peace. Not excitement, not pleasure, not the thrill of getting what you want, but peace, the quality of being at rest with what is, regardless of what is. And peace doesn't come from collecting experiences. Peace comes from needing less from reality before you can be okay. This isn't just mystical wisdom anymore. It's being validated by scientific research. The Dalai Lama talks about a simple study that researchers did. They invited volunteers to have conversations in small groups, 3 people at a time. And while these people talked, someone was sitting off to the side with a notebook, counting something very specific. They were counting how many times each person said I and my. Just those 2 words. I think, my opinion, I want, my experience. They tallied them up over 10 or 15 minutes of conversation. Then they studied these people over time. And what they found was striking. The people who used more self-referential language, more I and my, reported more unhappiness in their lives, more psychological problems, more stress, even more physical illness. Not because saying the words themselves causes problems. The words are just symptoms. But because the words reveal something about where the center of gravity is. When everything revolves around I and my, when the self is the constant reference point for every experience, suffering follows. This doesn't mean you should start talking about yourself in third person, like some kind of royal figure. This one would like to communicate that. That's just a verbal trick that doesn't address the underlying pattern. What matters is the actual orientation, of consciousness. Are you experiencing life through the narrow lens of, how does this affect me? Or have you expanded your circle of care to include others in a way that naturally de-emphasizes the self? Here's a question that might land differently than you expect. What if you're not the center of the universe? And what if that's actually relieving? Not depressing or diminishing, but relieving. What if you don't have to defend and promote and worry about this I constantly? What if you could include yourself in your circle of care without making yourself the only thing that matters? The shift from me to we, or even just what's needed here, that shift changes everything about how you experience life. And it changes how happy you can be, regardless of your circumstances. Let's look more closely at this me orientation and what it actually costs you. Every reactive emotion, every time you get angry or afraid or hurt or defensive, it starts with a sense of I being threatened. When I is threatened, anger rises to defend it. When mine is at risk, fear appears to protect it. When me is ignored or dismissed, hurt emerges to signal the wound. All of this reactivity, all of this emotional turbulence comes from this constant sense of a separate self that needs defending. It's exhausting. Think about what it takes to maintain this fortress of self. You have to constantly monitor how things are affecting you, judge whether experiences are good for you or bad for you, defend against perceived attacks, promote your interests, make sure you're getting your fair share, worry about what others think of you, protect your reputation, guard against being taken advantage of. It never ends. The self is so demanding, so needy, so vulnerable that it requires constant attention and defense. Now listen to what Shantideva, that 8th century Buddhist master, said about this. He wrote 2 verses in his guide to the Bodhisattva path that might be the most important teaching in the entire text. He said, "All the happiness that exists in the world comes from wishing for others to be happy. All the suffering that exists in the world comes from wishing only for yourself to be happy." And then he asks, rhetorically, but the question lands like a bell. Look at the difference between a noble person and an ordinary person, what they seek, what they do, what they achieve. Is there anything more that needs to be said? Just that. Just those 2 verses. And the implication is, this is the whole teaching. This is everything you need to know about the path to happiness and the path to suffering. All happiness comes from caring for others. all suffering comes from caring only for yourself. Now, we tend to distrust this teaching. It sounds like a trick, doesn't it? Like some kind of conspiracy where spiritual teachers convinced everyone to be selfless so that society would run smoothly and nobody would cause problems. We think, if I care about others instead of myself, won't I lose out? Won't I be taken advantage of? Won't my needs go unmet? But watch what actually happens in your experience. When you're completely focused on yourself, your needs, your wants, your grievances, your achievements, how does that feel? Are you happy? Are you at peace? Or are you constantly reactive, constantly defensive, constantly feeling like things aren't quite right? And when you genuinely care for someone else, when you do something helpful with no expectation of return, when you really listen to a friend in need, when you make someone's day a little easier just because you can, how does that feel? There's a lightness to it, a simplicity, a sense of rightness that doesn't come from getting what you want, but from getting out of your own way. This isn't self-negation. This isn't about martyring yourself or pretending you don't have needs or becoming a doormat for others to walk on. This is about self-expansion. It's about including others in your circle of care so naturally that the boundary between my well-being and your well-being starts to blur. When you care about someone else's happiness, you become less reactive about your own circumstances. When you're focused on what you can give rather than what you can get, you stop being so tightly wound around protecting and promoting yourself. And in that relaxation, in that release from the constant tyranny of self-concern, you find the very peace you were seeking. The relief of not having to defend a fortress anymore. The relief of not making everything about you. The relief of being part of something larger than your narrow self-interest. This is what the mystics discovered through direct experience, and what scientists are now confirming through research. Less self-reference equals more well-being. More care for others equals more genuine happiness. Not as a moral should, but as a simple fact about how consciousness works. There's a myth about freedom that most people believe without questioning it. The myth goes like this: I'm an adult. I live in a free country. I can do whatever I want. That's freedom. And then the sentence continues, and right now, I feel like. Whatever comes after, I feel like, that's not freedom. I feel like having a drink. I feel like checking my phone. I feel like ordering takeout even though I said I'd cook. I feel like scrolling social media even though it makes me feel worse. I feel like staying in bed even though I have things to do. Everything after I feel like is slavery to internal compulsion. You're not freely choosing. You're being driven by craving, by habit, by an impulse you didn't consciously decide to have. Real freedom isn't being able to do whatever your impulses demand. Real freedom is not being controlled by those impulses in the first place. Addiction is the clearest example of this. Someone addicted to alcohol or drugs will tell you they're just exercising their freedom to make their own choices. But watch them try to stop. Watch them try to go a week without the substance. Watch how the craving rises and how powerless they feel in front of it. That's not freedom. That's bondage. But it's not just substances. You can be addicted to anger, needing to feel that rush of righteousness, that sense of being right and others being wrong. You can be addicted to worry, your mind constantly seeking out the next thing to be anxious about. You can be addicted to busyness, to achievement, to approval, to being needed, to drama, to your own story of victimhood. Even positive things can become addictions if you can't be okay without them. If you need exercise to feel good, you're not free. You're dependent on exercise. If you need constant affirmation from others to feel worthy, you're not free. You're enslaved to others' opinions. If you need perfect conditions before you can be at peace, you're not free. You're imprisoned by your demands on reality. Real freedom, the kind the Buddha was pointing to, is much simpler and much more radical than that. Real freedom is not needing anything to be different before you can be at peace. Not rejecting life's pleasures or becoming some kind of stoic who doesn't enjoy anything, but not being dependent on those pleasures for your basic sense of okayness. Good food comes, enjoy it fully. It goes, that's okay too. Pleasant company arrives, appreciate it completely. They leave, you're still fine. Success happens, receive it with gratitude. Failure happens, you remain unshaken at your core. This is freedom. Not detachment, not indifference, not the inability to feel, but the ability to be fully present for whatever arises without being knocked off balance by it. The ability to choose from spaciousness rather than from craving. Here's the test. This moment, exactly as it is right now, without changing anything, can you be free here? Not, I'll be free when. Not, I could be free, if only. But right now, this breath, this sound, this sensation in your body, this quality of awareness, can freedom be found here? If not, what's actually stopping you? What are you demanding? Be different before you'll allow yourself to be okay. That demand, that's the prison. And you're holding the key. So how do you actually practice this? How do you begin to shift from self-centered craving to the freedom of open-handed living? Start simple. Start physical. Give things away. Not things you don't want anyway. That's just clearing clutter. But things that still have value, that you could keep, that part of you wants to hold on to. Look around your home at objects collecting dust, clothes you haven't worn in a year, books you've already read, kitchen gadgets you never use. Think about who might actually need them, who they might serve, and give them away. But here's the key, and this is where the real practice begins. Give with no expectation of thanks, no expectation of recognition, no expectation that the person will treasure what you've given or even remember that you gave it. No expectation that they'll return the favor someday. Just give from fullness with an open hand. Then expand beyond objects. Give attention when someone is speaking, real attention, not half listening while planning what you'll say next. Give time when someone needs help, even when it's inconvenient. Give presence to the moment in front of you, instead of always being mentally somewhere else. Each act of giving is an act of cutting anchors. Every time you give something without strings attached, you're loosening your grip on the need to control, to possess, to keep everything for yourself. You're practicing the art of open-handedness. And this isn't impoverishment, it's liberation. When you give freely, when you put yourself at the service of what's needed, rather than constantly asking, "What's in this for me?" something shifts. You discover that you're actually okay without hoarding. You discover that giving doesn't diminish you, it expands you. You discover that the boundaries you thought were so solid between mine and yours, between my well-being and your well-being, those boundaries start to dissolve. And in that dissolution, peace arises. Not because you've gotten what you wanted, but because you've stopped needing so much. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because you're no longer at war with what is. This is the happiness paradox. True wealth isn't having more, it's needing less. Real freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like, it's not being controlled by what you feel like. Genuine happiness isn't collecting pleasures, it's being at peace regardless. And the path to all of this begins with the simple practice of giving what you can, when you can, with an open heart and no expectation of return. Start there. Start today. Start with something small. And watch what happens when you live with open hands instead of clenched fists. Someone once asked a teacher a question that cuts right to the heart of something important. Is forgiveness the absence of ego? It's a beautiful question, carefully thought through. The answer isn't simple, because forgiveness operates at different levels, and all of them are valid. For some people, forgiveness feels like a huge weight they have to lift. Someone sinned against them, so now they must somehow muster the strength to pardon that sin, to release the debt, to absolve the guilty party. That's one level, and it's real work. If that's where you are, that's completely okay. The Buddhist approach is a bit different, more natural, less judicial. It's less like being a judge who magnanimously decides to let someone off the hook, and more like understanding that we're all children playing in a sandbox, and children sometimes hurt each other without meaning to. Here's the fundamental teaching that makes Buddhist forgiveness different. Everyone who loves you will hurt you. Not maliciously, but inevitably. Humans are imperfect, and if you spend enough time around an imperfect person, they will eventually cause you pain. So the Buddhist approach is pre-forgiveness. Before anyone hurts you, you already understand that they will, because they're human. You've already made peace with the fact that people you love will disappoint you, will say thoughtless things, will be caught up in their own pain, and inadvertently cause you pain. This isn't cynicism, it's realism, wrapped in compassion. Look honestly at your own experience. Haven't there been times when emotions hijacked you completely? When anger arose so strongly that you said things you regretted? When your own pain was so overwhelming that you couldn't see anyone else's? In those moments, you lost control. You were being driven by forces you barely understood and couldn't manage. If that's true for you, with whatever knowledge and practice and good intentions you have, then of course, it's true for everyone else. So forgiveness starts with forgiving yourself. You're harsh with yourself, aren't you? You say things to yourself in your own mind that you would never say to your worst enemy. You hold yourself to impossible standards and then beat yourself up when you fail to meet them. If you can't forgive yourself for being human, how can you possibly forgive others for being human? When you're not at peace in your own skin, constantly at war with your own limitations, you'll always be looking for someone outside yourself to blame for your problems. You'll need someone to be the villain in your story, so you can be the victim. Someone to be wrong, so you can be right. Someone to punish because you're already punishing yourself. But when you're at peace with your own humanity, when you can look at your failures with compassion instead of condemnation, then forgiving others becomes natural. Here's something to notice about yourself. You're incredibly good at justifying your own behavior and condemning others for the exact same thing. When you're late, you have excellent reasons. When someone else is late, they're inconsiderate. When you're short-tempered, it's because you're stressed. When someone else is short-tempered, they're being cruel. We're our own best lawyers, always making a perfect case for why our behavior was justified and why the other person's was unforgivable. Just notice this pattern operating in your mind. Notice how quick you are to understand your own circumstances and how slow you are to extend that same understanding to others. Forgiveness isn't the absence of ego. Exactly. It's what happens when the ego becomes less rigid, less defended, less invested in being right and making others wrong. It emerges naturally when you understand that everyone is struggling, everyone is doing their best with limited resources, and everyone, including you, will sometimes fail and cause harm despite their best intentions. So whenever anyone approaches you asking for forgiveness, give it without hesitation. And more than that, extend forgiveness even before it's asked for. Assume good intentions until clearly proven otherwise. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or staying in harmful situations. Forgiveness doesn't require remaining in relationship with people who continue to hurt you. You can forgive someone and still maintain healthy boundaries. But the internal release, the letting go of resentment and blame, that's what frees you. Not them. You. There's a way of understanding what feels like an attack that completely shifts how you experience it. Imagine someone walking ahead of you on a muddy path. They're struggling, burdened, barely able to keep their balance. They stumble, not trying to hurt you, but drowning in their own difficulty. As they fall forward into the mud, droplets fly up and land on your clothes. You're splattered now. It's uncomfortable and messy, and you'll have to clean it off. But was it an attack? Or just someone falling in their own mud, and you happened to be close enough to get some on you? Most of the time when someone hurts you, this is what's actually happening. They're not targeting you with malicious intent. They're drowning in their own pain, fear, confusion, or limitation, and in their desperate flailing, some of their mud gets on you. Think about the last time someone said something cruel to you. From your perspective, it felt personal, like they woke up, put your picture on their mirror, and spent the morning devising ways to hurt you. But if you could see into their inner world in that moment, you'd probably see someone suffering 100 times more than you are. Someone overwhelmed by their own insecurities, wounds, unprocessed pain. Someone so busy drowning that they can't even see you clearly. Their lashing out wasn't about you at all. It was a desperate cry from someone who's hurting and doesn't know how to handle it. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. Let's be very clear. Understanding why someone acts badly doesn't mean accepting continued bad treatment. You still need boundaries, protection, perhaps complete removal from the situation. But understanding this changes your relationship to the hurt. You're no longer carrying the additional weight of, why would they do this to me? And what did I do to deserve this? You can see it for what it is. Someone else's suffering, spilling over onto you. And here's where the teaching gets radical. Shantideva says, don't just forgive the person who hurt you. Thank them. Thank them? Yes. Thank them for taking on the difficult role of being the irritant in your life, the person who shows you exactly where you still have work to do. A beggar isn't an obstacle to your generosity. The beggar is what makes generosity possible. Without someone in need, you couldn't practice giving. In the same way, the person who irritates you isn't an obstacle to your patience. They're what makes patience possible. If you only ever interacted with people who were kind and agreeable, you'd never develop real patience at all. You'd never learn to remain centered when things don't go your way. The difficult person in your life, the one who pushes your buttons, who doesn't change no matter how many times you explain, that person is your teacher. They're showing you exactly where your practice needs to deepen. They're revealing your attachments, expectations, demands on reality. They're exposing the places where you're still rigid, still reactive. This person is perfect for your development right now. Now, this teaching can be badly misused. This is not about staying in abusive relationships and calling it spiritual practice. This is not about accepting mistreatment and pretending it's good for you. If someone is genuinely harming you, get out and protect yourself. This teaching is about ordinary difficulties. The coworker who's annoying but not harmful. The family member who means well but pushes your buttons. The friend who's thoughtless, sometimes, but not malicious. These ordinary irritants, these are your practice field. The practice is to see them not as obstacles to your peace, but as opportunities to develop real equanimity that doesn't depend on everyone behaving exactly the way you want them to. So instead of constantly asking, why is this person in my life? Or when will they finally change? Try asking, what is this situation teaching me about myself? What demands am I making? Where am I still rigid? What would it take for me to be at peace, even with this difficult person in my life? That's where the real work is. Here's something worth examining in your own experience. When clouds ruin your picnic, you don't get angry at the clouds. When a baby cries on an airplane, you might be irritated by the noise, but you don't feel personally attacked by the infant. So what's the difference between these situations and when a person does something that bothers you? The difference is attributed intentionality. For you to feel justified in your anger, for that finger of blame to really point, you need to believe that someone chose to hurt you on purpose. That they could have acted differently and deliberately decided not to. Without that attribution of intention, the anger doesn't quite stick. So here's the question to ask yourself when you're hurt or angry. Are you sure they meant to harm you? Really sure? Or is it possible they were clumsy rather than cruel? Unconscious rather than malicious? Caught up in their own pain rather than plotting against you? What if they're more like the clouds than you think? Just doing what clouds do, being shaped by forces they don't fully control, raining on your parade, not because they have anything against you personally, but because that's what's happening right now in their weather system. The freedom comes in questioning the story you're telling about their intentions. Maybe they did mean harm. Sometimes people do act from spite or malice. But more often, much more often, people are just stumbling through their own lives, causing collateral damage as they go, not because they're evil, but because they're struggling and limited and human. When you can release the story that they're deliberately targeting you, when you can see them as just another person drowning in their own difficulty, the hurt becomes simpler. Not gone. It might still be there, but lighter, less personal, easier to release. Just this questioning, are they really trying to hurt me, or are they just being human, can shift everything. These teachings might feel heavy. You might have come here hoping for something soothing, something that would simply help you relax and feel better without asking anything of you. Instead, you've been invited to examine how you create your own suffering, to look at the patterns of mind that keep you trapped, to question the stories you've been telling about yourself and others. You came for peace, someone once said to a teacher, and you're telling me I need to change everything. The teacher responded, "This is the path to peace, not temporary comfort that fades when circumstances change, but real freedom." These teachings might fall like lead. They might feel like too much. But here's what's important to understand. You don't need perfection. You don't need to achieve instant enlightenment or become someone completely different overnight. You just need willingness to see things a little differently. Willingness to notice when you're carrying unnecessary weight and consider setting it down. Willingness to catch yourself in complaint and ask if it's helping. Willingness to question whether people really meant to hurt you or were just struggling in their own way. One insight carried forward changes your trajectory. Even if you only remember one thing from these hours together, even if only one teaching lands and sticks, that one shift in perspective can ripple through your entire life. Remember the bird with stones tied to its feet? It doesn't need to remove all the stones at once to start flying. Even releasing one stone makes the next attempt at flight easier. You don't have to transform completely. You just have to take one step toward releasing what you don't need to carry. That's enough. That's more than enough. The bird can fly when the stones are released, and you can find peace when you stop fighting reality and learn to let go. Welcome home to yourself, to this moment, to the freedom that's been here all along, waiting for you to stop carrying what you never needed to carry in the first place. The path is open. You've already begun. Now we shift from understanding to embodiment. What we've explored together in words needs to become lived experience, not through force, but through gentle practice. In a moment, we'll spend about 15 minutes together in silence, you in your space, wherever you are in the world, and these words as a guide. Find a comfortable position, sitting or lying down, whatever serves you best. Let your eyes close if that feels right. This is practice, not performance. If you drift into sleep, that's perfectly fine. Your body knows what it needs. The theme is simple: letting go. First, let go of the commentary. Stop narrating what's happening and just experience it directly. When the mind wanders, and it will, just notice and gently return. Let go of past burdens, setting them on the table where they no longer weigh on you. Let go of future fantasies, recognizing that this present moment is already complete. Let go of demands on reality, accepting what is, without the exhausting fight to make things different. Rest here, pure being, no doing. Thank you for these hours together. From Tokyo to Toronto, Mumbai to Mexico City, you're part of something larger. People everywhere learning to carry less, to be more present, to find peace beneath the overthinking. You're not alone in this. Peace is already here, under all the noise. Return to these teachings whenever you need them. If it feels right, share one more time where you're listening from. Your mind can be quiet. You just remembered how. Rest here as long as you need.